And once again, it's a tradition like no other. Nobody's watching, but that's okay. Because honestly, the way we
One
set it up,
day there's going to be somebody out there, and it's
I'm
not
gonna
going to be
have.
somebody we know.
Yeah, well, we're gonna cut these videos up anyway. But today we're looking forward to really the next 8 weeks. I texted you this morning, by the way. So by the time we're done with these previews, it's going to be August 15th.
Wow.
We'll
Yeah,
be
that'll
halfway
be
through
the Bears
training
will have
camp at
2
this point.
preseason games done by then.
Yeah, we'll probably have news of Caleb Williams being terrible in training camp. We can kind of go over that.
Yeah,
Maybe
and the Packers defense, do they actually look
ferocious.
good? No, but they'll be bad once the season's.
Yeah, oh man, they're ferocious. They're getting after it in training camp.
Yeah,
They're
a lot of
bonds.
interceptions.
They're going to give up 40 points to the Eagles week 1.
Week 1.
But we're not talking about
but
we're not talking about the Eagles tonight. We are talking about the AFC East, a division that was won by the Bills, but I would argue dominated by the Dolphins. So naturally, I bring those two teams up. We're actually going to start with the team that dominated it the previous decade, the New England Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if you're going to talk about the Patriots, you have to really kind of consider one thing above all else. There's a giant elephant in the room, and it's a new head coach. They haven't had a head coach since Pete Carroll, or they haven't had a different head coach besides Bill Belichick since Pete Carroll was there in '99, I should say. So this whole thing is going to be a huge transition from Bill. And I think the number one thing that kind of stood out to me in the way they kind of, I want to say they brought, like when Gerard Mayer did head coach Gerard Mayer, when he did his opening press conference, is I think he was talking about culture change. And that's going to be an interesting thing to kind of see if that's actually what they needed. Because the more I dove into the Patriots from last season, I just think their quarterback play was downright awful. Like one of the worst years of quarterback play we've ever seen. And Bill's partially responsible for that.
Yeah.
But Gerard Mayer, new head coach, he was a 2008 draft pick for the Patriots, had a nice playing career with them, immediately became an assistant, and he's only known really 2 head coaches in his playing career since leaving high school. And that was for Bill Belichick and Phil Fulmer when he was at Tennessee. I think the other thing to note about the Patriots is the head coach no longer has full control of the roster. That's been kind of the way they've set up their team building. Basically going back to Belichick. Belichick's had full control of the roster going back to 2000. Elliott Wolf now has basically full control of that. He's a longtime Green Bay front office guy, son of Ron Wolf, who was responsible for the early Buccaneers teams that made NFC title games, the 80s Raiders, and then the 90s Packers. I think the interesting thing I saw from Mayo, or what he said in his press conference, is, quote, "I'm not going to try and be Bill. One thing you'll notice about me as we continue to go is I don't like echo chambers. I want people around me that are going to question my ideas and, yes, question the way we have done things in the past. Because realistically, I don't like that. Like, what was your takeaway from?
Yeah, I was really, which it is interesting because
you only won 6 Super Bowls doing it that way.
You only won 6 Super Bowls, and as people found out when we did our Patriots dynasty watch, we're Bill defenders. But also at the same time, it's interesting because the pairing of Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo was actually what I wanted the Bears to do in 2022 when they ended up hiring Poles and Eberflus.
Yeah.
I think that who knows for sure. I think eventually, they're 2 very smart football-minded people. It's right now it's going to be a rocky start, and to kind of, I don't know I even want to put it, jettison yourself from the way things have been done or who's brought you to this point. I probably don't agree with that way of working, but
I don't like that he used the term echo chamber because it's like,
yeah.
because it made it seem basically like everybody just followed Bill blindly.
Yeah,
And
and really, I mean, even in the dynasty, was that really a thing that, well, I guess maybe like the only time that I can think that there was like a moment where everybody was like, well, Bill's just doing this, like this is Bill's idea, was the Aaron Hernandez situation. Like other than that, like, yeah, Bill was the commander, but
yep,
everybody had their own role on the ship. You know, like everybody was a cog in the machine. And I don't think Bill acted as like a dictator of sorts, but
yeah.
I guess maybe that's how Gerard Mayo's and clearly Kraft probably too.
Yeah, and the sense that I get is like when I listen to a lot of like, you know, of I guess his pupils per se, like when they talk in the media, like a Michael Lombardi, Scott Pioli, one of the things they always tend to say when it comes to team building and like scouting and things like that is good decisions a lot of the time are based on when there's not a consensus. So it's the exact opposite of what Mayo is saying. I think Bill, in terms of game plan strategy, yeah, he was probably a dictator when it came to that, but he was
Yeah.
mostly right. One thing that was interesting to me is the Patriots, even though their record was 4-13, they lost a lot of like one possession games last year. I don't like a lot of people are kind of penciling them in to be one of the worst teams in football, and I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. I think a lot of that is obviously dependent on Drake May. But I like pretty much every outside of losing Bill Belichick, who's arguably the greatest coach ever. I think they've really kind of upgraded the rest of their roster almost across the board. It really, especially offensively, it couldn't get worse than where it was last year. If you look at who Mayo brought in to run the offense, Alex Van Pelt, longtime offensive coordinator with a ton of different teams. He also brought in former Giants head coach Ben McAdoo. And as much crap as people give Ben McAdoo, he did get the Giants to the playoffs in 2016. Like he wasn't a complete failure. And he was the guy that kept yelling for the Giants to draft Patrick Mahomes, and they didn't do that.
Yeah.
So, you know, take it because and apparently a lot of the reason was probably they probably believed that Eli still had a few years left, and in reality, they probably should have drafted Patrick Mahomes. But Van Pelt, the interesting thing is he's never called plays, so I think there's going to be kind of a joint effort between McAdoo and Van Pelt to kind of call the offense, and they've worked together before. Van Pelt and McAdoo were actually together in Green Bay back in 2013. McAdoo was the quarterback coach, and Van Pelt was the tight end coach. So they have worked together in the past. So we'll kind of see, and I think they're going to be really instrumental in Drake May's development, especially McAdoo, who has that quarterback coach background.
When I have a question for you,
mm-hmm.
When do you think? I guess is maybe like a two-folded question, actually. When do you think May starts? And if he doesn't start if he doesn't win the training camp, is it a training camp battle? Has that been announced?
Oh, it should be now.
Okay, well, I just didn't know if it's Jacoby Brissett's job and May will take over, like similar to how the Bears have done things in the past.
If I'm the Patriots, and this is probably an unpopular opinion, because I would argue in terms of tools, and we've talked about Drake May through the draft process, arguably the most talent of any quarterback in the class.
Yeah.
Like you look at rushing ability, he can make every throw down the field that you ask him to. Really where a lot of like his question marks come into is, you know, he played in the ACC, which doesn't have a huge history of producing great quarterbacks. I would say of the Power Four, I guess it's Power Four conferences now, but of the Power Five conferences, I would put the ACC like on the bottom of that. But I think the biggest question around him is just his mechanical stuff. Yeah. So if I'm the Patriots, and the way I look at it is why subject Drake May to pressure week 1 as a starter when you have the perfect quarterback behind him in Jacoby Brissett that has worked with Alex Van Pelt before, because Van Pelt was in Cleveland 2 years ago, where Jacoby Brissett played the first 13 games of the season for the Cleveland Browns because Deshaun Watson got suspended. I mean, at this point, like, Jacoby Brissett is pretty much the bridge quarterback of the NFL. Like, to me, you don't sign him in free agency
unless you're drafting a quarterback in the first round.
Yeah, and because he's not bad. Like, that's the thing, is he's really the ideal like backup quarterback for any team, I think. Like, if your quarterback gets hurt, like, he can still go in and basically not lose it for you.
He's the last Patriot to have won a Super Bowl, right?
I guess so.
Yeah, it's kind of
was
wild.
No, there's got to be. Well, like, Kyle Van Noy's still in the NFL, I think.
But like on the Patriots,
technically, because he's back.
Oh no, David Andrews is still there.
Yeah,
that's right. He's been around.
Yeah, we'll talk about him in a second.
No, I was thinking just because I'm always intrigued about when rookie quarterbacks get their start. If I'm New England, and now there's no such thing as a soft landing in the NFL, everything's going to be difficult. And Drake May, though I like him a lot, will struggle, as all rookie quarterbacks do. But just looking at their schedule, they open up in Cincinnati, which is not an easy place to play, but it's not a defense like the defenses that they're going to see later on in the schedule. Like, if he started week 1, that sucks. But all right, we're not expecting a lot from you. Go out there, and then you come home and you play Seattle. Seattle had a terrible defense last year. They should be better with Mike McDonald this year, but that's like, hey, that's a nice little home opener, you know. But here's where they have a short week where they have to go to East Rutherford to play the Jets. I don't know. Like,
the Jets, we'll talk about them in a little bit. They got a really good unit.
If Jacoby Brissett is still the quarterback by Seattle, he has to be the quarterback for that Thursday night game against the Jets. And then the following week, they're playing in San Francisco. That's not like, I don't want my rookie quarterback having his first 2 games or first game at either one of those places.
I think this is the type of team. Like, if I'm the Patriots and I'm building, a lot of people had the take. I disagreed with this take, because if you think there's a talented quarterback that's worthy of going in the top 5, you take him regardless of situation. A lot of people thought they should have traded back into like the 9th or 10th spot with Minnesota and take JJ McCarthy and like get a first, or not even take a quarterback. I didn't.
Yeah, I heard people saying wait till next year, but
no, you don't know.
Dion already said Shador ain't going there, so
yeah, okay. But like the thing about May is that, and I disagreed with that, because number one, if you get a quarterback worthy of going in the top 5, you just take him. If you have a vacancy like that. Because, like we mentioned, Jacoby Brissett, he is not a long-term solution. He's ideally a guy that's going to play the first half of the season. Like, I don't think Drake May, like, in a perfect world, obviously things are going to break apart. Like, if Brissett gets hurt, or if he's really bad and the Patriots are losing all these games, you know, and Drake May is killing in practice, then it's really what I would want to see is like, let Drake May just master the practice field and get his confidence going, and like where he's a master of his own mechanics, a master of the playbook, just the pace of play in the NFL. He's going to have to learn how to play under center. There's like nuance to this that people don't think about when it comes to playing quarterback in the NFL versus playing in college. It's not the same game, right? And not to mention the NFL is so much faster than college football. I say, like, let him get his feet wet. You mentioned like that's why you bring Brissett in. And the other thing is you have a young offense around you. Like, I would let them kind of build their confidence first. Like I mean, I'll bring up the receivers that you have in this room. Arguably last year they were the worst unit in the entire league. And you had Devontae Parker, who's retired now. Juju Smith-Schuster is probably a cut candidate. Tyquan Thornton, complete bust. The only guy that was really productive for them was Kendrick Bourne, and he tore his ACL. So there was just zero production from like the veterans of that group. Hunter Henry didn't do that much. But as bad as they were, the quarterback play with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi was even worse. So this passing game can't get any worse, even if you start a rookie Drake May. But I would let these young kids like Jalen Polk, who they drafted second round out of Washington. You have Javon Baker out of UCF, who was drafted in the fourth round. I would let those guys kind of build their confidence with Jacoby Brissett. And then as those guys are kind of picking up their steam in the middle of the year, then I bring Drake May in. And then we're like, ideally, if I'm the Patriots, the way I'd want this season to go for the offense is like the classic team that goes like 8-9, 7-10, where you're really bad in terms of win-loss at the first half of the season. And then you pick up steam in the second half. And then going into 2025, like, oh, wow, we could be a playoff contender.
Yeah.
That's the way, that should be the goal for the Patriots, is to just get this thing running to where 2025, we're back in the hunt for a wild card. That's the way I would approach the season. It's not just as simple as, hey, let's throw Drake May out there and see what happens. Because I don't think he is not just a guy that's ready to go. He's like starter day one. That, to me, that was never him. He has a super high ceiling, but he's got a lot of work to do too.
Yeah, I like Drake May, as we've said before during the draft process, but I think if the Patriots were like, now I know that's what the Patriots are thinking or what they're hoping, like, hey, it would be great if we could do the 7-10, 8-9 thing. But I think that would be like a 98th percentile outcome for them. I still do think that they are a long way from where they need to be. And I know the defense is pretty good, but even with the rookie quarterback, there's going to be growing pains. Even with Jacoby Brissett, you're not going to, I mean, are they going to be like Carolina Panthers bad from this year? No, I don't think anybody is that bad this year. I mean, of course, we didn't think the Panthers are going to be that bad last year.
Well, the Panthers were a classic example of a team that had no plan last year. Like it's like they had no identity. They had no direction. Like what I'm saying,
we know yet that the Patriots do yet, though.
I agree with you that if they just start Drake May week one, like the Panthers did Bryce Young last year, it could actually end up that way, because like Bryce Young looked like he wasn't ready to play, and the Panthers weren't ready to field the team around him for him to develop and his confidence. Like Bryce Young looked like a shell of himself. Like we saw him make throws at Alabama that he did not make all last year.
Yeah.
And that's this team, this roster, this receiving core, you need them to build up it. Like I said, I would just throw Jacoby Brissett out to the wolves. Like he'll make chicken salad out of chicken, here. And then when I said 8, 9, 7, and 10, I agree. That's probably a stretch for this team. My point though is like the teams that are like that classic 8, 9, 7, and 10, even like 6 and 11. Look at like last year.
The Bears were last year. You have an idea like, oh, hey, like if we keep this moving in the right direction, this is where we might be.
I think the Bears had more talent than the Patriots do now. The example I was going to use were actually the Cardinals. Kind of similar because they had a worse bridge quarterback. Josh Dobbs was terrible, but I think Jacoby Brissett will be a better quarterback than that. But like, they didn't have a lot of skill outside. Kyler Murray missed the first 2.5 months of the season. They were like, what, a 4-win team, 5-win team last year, but at least I feel better about their chances to maybe win 7 to 9 games this season, right? And they're trending up because of what they're doing. And the Patriots, that's the approach I would take. Like, this is not a playoff team, but there are now pieces that you have. This season is about basically being a good steward of the assets you have.
Being patient.
How do they go about, handling their assets? Do they do what the Cardinals did, which I think was the right, like Jonathan Gannon obviously didn't have the record to contend for the award. I thought he was one of the better coaches in football last year. They played so many close games. They had a lot of games where they were right there to win. And like they nearly beat Baltimore, I think, in Baltimore, if I'm not mistaken. So, it was Washington week 1, but they had a lot of close games. They should have beat LA. They had them in the second half, but they couldn't finish games. And I keep going back to Arizona, but New England is that type of team that they have so much young talent now with Polk, with Baker. They just brought in Antonio Gibson, who's one of the better receiving backs in the league.
They drafted a great corner too.
Christian Gonzalez. We'll get to the defense in a second.
That was last year, but wasn't he from South Carolina? Dial, I think.
Yeah. But like this team has some pieces, but it's really about, like you said, I mean, and like I think we both are on the same page with the Patriots. They're not like this team's not going to make the playoffs more than likely. I mean, you never know. Drake May could just come out and be a superstar, and we could be wrong. But
crazier thing, they would be like the Falcons from 2008. You never know.
But I think with the way this team is built, this is a transition period. I think this is going to be, I would say on offense, kind of wait and see, but you want to see progress from the skill players. I wouldn't start Drake May until week 10. Looking at their offensive line, I would say, to put it bluntly, they struggled last season.
Yeah.
Really, they were really poor. This whole offense was just awful in pretty much every way. They did bring back Michael Nwanwu, who was one of their pretty much their best linemen. I would argue he's actually one of the most underrated right tackles in all of football. But the rest of their line is really shaky. Cole Strange, which was a strange pick in a lot of people's opinion. He was a first-round pick from Chattanooga.
It was projected to go in like the 3rd or 4th round.
Yeah. A lot of people were surprised. Let's just say that. He's not expected to be ready by start of camp. He finished last season on IR. David Andrews, you brought him up earlier. He's 32 years old. Can he keep playing like a top 10 center? I mean, if he does, it's par for the course for David Andrews. But like at some point, when do the wheels fall off for him? And you hope it's not this season with your rookie quarterback. You really hope that he can continue his play. They signed a left tackle with Chukwuna Okorafor, who was with Pittsburgh. He has never had a run block or pass block grade higher than 65 per PFF. So
all right.
He's not great.
Only way to go is up.
C.D. So was a promising 4th-round pick from Eastern Michigan last year. 14th ranked run blocking guard. Would love to see him jump, make a year 2 jump as a pass blocker. So their O-line's kind of in transition, and that's kind of what I'm saying is like let maybe Cole Strange get healthy. Let's see if So makes that jump. Can we make sure David Andrews is actually healthy and active through midseason? Because I think if you have a healthy and cohesive line, I also feel better about having Drake May out there. Like, I don't want to throw Drake May to the wolves, is my point. I do not want them to do what the Panthers did to Bryce Young last year.
Yeah, you don't want to stunt his development.
Yeah, because so many people are like, look what Justin Herbert did as a rookie. Like, Justin Herbert had way more talent than this.
Yeah, although I will say to play a rookie early, not play him. There actually is nothing to support either. Like it's basically the correlation is even.
It almost depends on the situation you're in.
Yeah, it depends on your situation.
Yeah. And
most guys that don't start right away, it's oftentimes because there's somebody very good ahead of them. So that is the hard part for Drake May, is that there isn't somebody that's very good ahead of him, and he's not going to be. There will be calls like when the Jets probably and the 49ers hold the Patriots to 17 total points over 2 weeks. There's going to be calls on Boston radio networks. We need to put in Drake May. We need to put in Drake May. And that was a terrible Boston accent. I don't even know what I was doing.
Yeah, I'm not good at Boston accents either. I'm better at like New York than anything.
Yeah. We're really good at the Midwestern accent.
Yeah, you are, especially because you are Midwestern.
Yeah, that helps.
I can do a Southern accent.
But yeah, it's they're like I said, the number one word for the Patriots offense this year, their theme has to just be patience, because it isn't going to come together, and there's going to be a lot of growing pains.
Yeah. And a lot of people didn't even like the skill players, because in the draft, everybody pushes to, especially for a young quarterback, they talk about receivers, running backs, like building skill players, right? Like a lot of people kind of question the Jalen Polk pick. But I actually, the more I looked at him, I really thought that both of those receivers actually fit what Drake May does really well. And that's kind of why I'm saying, like, let those guys like kind of get into the rhythm of playing in the NFL. So that way, when Drake May comes in, like he's got 2 confident outside guys. Because Pop Douglas is actually really good. He was one of the more productive rookies, and he was a 6th-round pick, but he's like primary a slot receiver. So he's going to be like I think he's only like 5'8", 5'9". He's kind of a low A-dot type of player. But like Polk and Baker. So Polk is from Washington. He was a 2nd-round pick, and Javon Baker, 4th-round pick from UCF. They really fit what Drake May does well. Polk like had a questionable profile that people don't like that much, but I would argue it's like, yeah, but you're playing alongside Ramadunze, top 10 pick, and Jalen McMillan, who was a 3rd-round pick. When you have that much talent on one receiving core, like of course you're not going to be putting up the stats of some of these other guys that are picked around you, right? And I think I would argue Polk succeeded where Drake May succeeded, downfield and specifically over the middle of the field. That's where May's going to have success. He's not really an outside the numbers type of guy. We talked about this on the draft show. He's going to attack in between the numbers towards the hashes. And that's a really, really positive strength, but you also got to have a quarterback or a wide receiver that's willing to like take some hits, right? And has that contested catch ability, because not all receivers have, the makeup to confidently go over the middle of the field and catch the ball with confidence, right? And then the kid from UCF, Javon Baker, he was actually a big-time recruit. He went to Alabama and then transferred to Central Florida. So he has I would say he has a lot of talent, and he produced at UCF. So I think he's got some ability. Like there's some exciting pieces, and even like this is really kind of reaching a lot of. You're getting. Did we lose internet?
One of us. Steven?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You
okay.
You froze there twice. Did I freeze?
No, I don't know.
I wasn't talking.
Okay. Well, I guess we're good. I'll keep going.
Yeah. Keep going. The show goes on.
Yes. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh, so Jaheim Bell, a lot of people like Jaheim Bell. And I think he's going to be more like an H-back. He played a lot of running back at South Carolina. There's a lot of weapons to like, but they're so young. I would just, like I said, I would just let them kind of get the experience and then bring May in once I think he refines a lot of his skill sets. So when he comes in, he's 100% the quarterback you want him to be. Shifting to the defense for the Patriots, this team plays a ton of dime packages. Brett Coleman mentioned it on his preview, which I encourage a lot of people to listen to if they really like football. I think they ran dime packages like 75% of the time. So their defense relies a lot on like beef up front, right? So Christian Barmore, I think it's Godshaw, correct me if I'm wrong, and Keon White. So Barmore's 315, Godshaw's 330, Keon White's 285.
Boy, yeah.
Barmore took a huge leap in year 3 and became
Barmore's going to get paid soon.
He is, yeah, and he took a huge leap last year in year 3 of his career and became one of the best interior rushers in all of football. 49 total pressures, 8 sacks, 7 quarterback hits for an interior lineman that basically isn't even like his main job isn't even to generate pressure. It's really just to take up blockers and let his linebackers and defensive backs kind of do their thing. He does a really good job. At outside linebacker, Matthew Judon has been I wouldn't say like a perennial all-pro player, but he's just like a very good player when he's healthy. He only played 4 games last year, though, with a torn bicep. So they'll need him to kind of wreak havoc off the edge. You have Josh Uche, Anthony Jennings kind of rotating off the edge as well. Jawan Bentley and Jelani Tavai, pretty solid tacklers and coverage guys. Bentley's probably going to be the green dot on a regular basis. And then Tavai was actually really good last year, and he was a bust in Detroit. And the first thing I thought of, they found another Kyle Van Noy, because that's exactly what happened with him.
That's true.
Kyle Van Noy was a second-round pick, I think, in Detroit. Was not good there. Patriots pick him up, and he was like a staple of their defense on I want to say like 2 Super Bowl teams. In the secondary, the Pats have 2 thumpers at safety. Run support is so important when you're playing dime packages. So you actually need your defensive backs to actually tackle. And Kyle Duggar can definitely do that, and Jabril Peppers can bring it as well. So they're really solid there. You mentioned Christian Gonzalez, or I think I did, and you mentioned the other kid from South Carolina. Gonzalez, I think, is going to be one of the better corners in the entire league. We saw really good flashes from him last season. I want to say like his main flash was against Miami last season, when I think he held like Jalen Waddle / Tua to like 2 catches on 32 yards in coverage. So he's a really good player. Jonathan Jones is reliable. Marcus Jones looks to slide in as the starting nickel. Like, I think defensively, this team's pretty good.
Very good defensively.
So that's the other reason I think you can start Brissett and just kind of cultivate what you want May to be, because I think you could actually win some close games. You don't have to make a huge leap from what they had offensively last year to get to some wins. And this is where I'm going to leave the Patriots. And if you want any points after that, feel free to make them. But this is my closing argument for why the Patriots are going to be way better. And I think they might actually be a 7 to 10, or not 10 win, but 7 to 8 win team this year. Here's my main argument. They were one of the worst kicking units in the league last year. I would say the worst, and maybe the worst kicking units in recent memory. So last year, rookie Chad Ryland only converted 64% of his field goals. I want people to know, like, typically, like, a good kicker is above 85% on his field goal units or field goal percentage. And Chad Ryland was converting 64%. So with that, I think you got to consider the Patriots lost 6 games by 1 possession or less. And when they lost so many close 1 possession games, that bad kicking performance by Ryland, if he makes 80% of his kicks, do they go, instead of 4-13, do they go 6-11? And that's my main argument. This Patriots team lost 6 games by 1 possession. If that flips on its head and they win, if they lose only a few more, let's say they lose 4 games by 1 possession instead of 6, and a lot of it with better kicking performances and not terrible play from Mac Jones, I think a lot of this will jump in the Patriots' favor, and I think they can win more games than they're expected to.
Yeah. Yeah, not me. And I do hear you. I do want to say for our friends out there, Steven does have some a fairly decent history of hitting on some, like, pretty well constructed predictions for the season over the years that we've been friends. However, Steven does also throw a lot of darts at the wall. So I think this is a dart at the wall. And you are going to be right about somebody or a couple of teams. Maybe that Cardinals prediction. No, but no. I'm going to say that I went through their schedule. I'm going to use Playoff Predictor to try to piece together a full game by game prediction. I have New England again at 4-13 this year. Their over under is 4.5 according to Vegas. It's the lowest over under in the league. I love their defense. I do think they take a step back because they want to have Bill. And I think the offense, I like Drake May, as I've said, but I think that there'll be muchos growing pains. And
I think the wild card, I think I'm only arguing that.
Oh, certainly.
It's the range of outcomes.
Yes, the range of outcomes. Yes.
You have to, when we're talking about team predictions, and this goes for the 31 other teams that we go into. Thankfully, we're not doing all 31 tonight, but there's a range of outcomes for everything because, of course, quarterback health is going to play into it. We have a new coach with Mayo. How does he adjust? But I think if things go right, let's say they hit on some of these draft picks, if Mayo can keep the defense at 90% of what it was under Bill, and like I said, the offense was so terrible last year, I think the Alex Van Pelt, Ben McAdoo addition is huge. It's just a huge upgrade. This team 2 years ago had Matt fucking Patricia calling its plays. Okay. And then last year, Bill O'Brien, who hadn't been in the NFL for 4 years at that point, he wasn't it either. And Mac Jones was legit one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL last season. So there's just so much that can improve.
Yeah.
But again, the Patriots have been dysfunctional. And if they make bad decisions, I'm with you. This could be one of the worst teams in the league. I also think they could overachieve. I think so yes, I'm throwing darts technically, but I think people are not considering the high-end outcome for them. And I think in 2 years, this could be a playoff team if things go right. And that's not super optimistic. I mean, you could say that about almost every team.
Yeah.
But any other thoughts on the Patriots?
No. I think I'm ready to move on.
We have the Miami Dolphins next on the list. We'll try to go a little faster.
Dolphins, the greatest football team.
Love that song.
But the best version, Steven, is
the T-Pain version.
The T-Pain version.
The Dolphins are a team I think that has to actually. Buffalo, you could argue this. I think this team is under the most pressure to win.
Oh, dear God. If they don't do it this year, will they ever
It'll-
win the East if they don't win it this year?
This is it. It's up on it. Last year, I would argue it's on a silver platter, and they still couldn't get it done. I would argue that they have as much talent in the league as any team.
Oh, yeah.
Any, like maybe outside of San Francisco. But this team, if you look at the offensive skill positions in particular, it's outrageous what they have. Tua at quarterback was the highest graded passer in the league last year per PFF. He was 7th in EPA, 1st in deep ball accuracy, 2nd in yards per attempt. From weeks 1 to 13, he had 6 80-plus passing grade games. However, from week 14 on, it was like a different quarterback and a different offense. So from weeks 14 to 18, he had 0 of those 80-plus passing grade performances. And his worst outing came in that wild card loss, where they just like I've never seen a team, and maybe it was just Al Michaels like projecting this feeling on me. I've never seen a visiting team less interested in playing football than I saw the Miami. Like they did not want to be there.
No.
And it was
in one way, you couldn't blame them because of how cold it was, but you would think that there would have been a fire in their belly after they did have a home playoff game basically the week before.
If I'm a Dolphins fan, I would be just so upset because it's like, have some freaking pride. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I know it's cold, but like 80,000 fans for the Chiefs show up and they're like, and you're getting paid so much. Like
people had to buy the game on Peacock or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I already had Peacock, so thankfully I could watch it. But like that was one of the most disappointing performances. And of course, everyone that had Peacock, of course, saw it. But that's the question for Tua. Can he put together? I'd honestly like welcome a slow start from Tua. Can he have an Aaron Rodgers type season where he's not great the first 4 weeks of the season, and then he comes out like week 6 through the end of the season and is awesome? Like I'd almost rather have that. Like it's kind of crazy to say this, but like don't start too fast if you're the Dolphins.
Yeah, don't blow your load, as they say.
Yeah, this team scored 70 freaking points against the Broncos in September last year. Like it was crazy. Like the amount of talent this team has offensively is just outrageous. Like I said, I would put them up with any team in the league, especially I don't know if everybody agrees. I would say Tyreek Hill is the best receiver in the NFL. I think we can say that, right? And he's the most valuable non-quarterback.
Most electrifying player in the NFL that the NFL has seen in years or ever.
Yes. Yeah. If you look at their running backs, though, Mostert, 4th in the NFL in EPA, 21st in yards created per touch. Devon Achane is the superstar of this unit, though. 1st in the NFL in EPA. Where do you think he finished in weighted opportunities?
Not high because of how many snaps he actually had.
43rd in weighted opportunities per player profiler. He delivered that stat for us. But if you finish first, and I said total EPA, not EPA per play, but expected points added at running back. So basically every time this dude touched the ball, they were getting huge chunk plays. Like I would argue he is the most electrifying running back in the NFL. They have the most electrifying receiver and running back. Every single play this team runs could be an 80-yard touchdown. Like this is an explosive offense. The only question with Achane is like he's a sub 200-pound guy, so like how much work can he actually take, and will the efficiency? It should probably come down if he does get more touches. But I think he's basically at the level we've rarely seen, and he's always going to be playing against the light box because you always have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill on the field, right? I think he's going to win a lot of people fantasy leagues if he can get to like 250 touches. I've been like, if I'm in a fantasy draft, like I'm going after Achane anywhere I can get him. And the thing is, like, with all that speed, because Mostert and Achane are like the two most electrifying running backs. They drafted another 4.3 guy, Jalen Wright, in the 4th round. Like, so all their guys are like sub 4.4 guys. And then like they're just gonna run outside zone and just kill teams with it. So I think Tua is in line to have another great year, assuming he stays healthy
and he doesn't turn the ball over.
But this offense is set up for his skill set perfectly. We mentioned Tyreek Hill, best receiver in the NFL, 1st in yards per route run, 3rd in EPA, 6 games with a 90+ receiving grade, back-to-back years as PFF's #1 wide receiver. They signed Odell Beckham. My only comment there is who cares? He hasn't been good in 8 years.
Yeah.
I'm actually more interested to see what they do with Anthony Schwartz, who was with Cleveland. So 4.3 guy. So like, are they?
He ended up there.
Yeah, and that dude's fast as hell too. I would argue he was the fast. Jalen Waddle's like maybe the 6th fastest player on this offense, which is just outrageous. Like, and Jalen Waddle, I didn't even mention him yet, but like he is just a super solid contributor. Like, I would argue the best 2nd receiver in the entire league.
Oh, we gave Tua the wrong name. I just realized.
Oh, Hawk Tua.
Hawk Tua.
You spit on that thing.
Gotta give them that. Hawk Tua turned the ball over.
How many people are gonna name their fantasy teams the Hawk Tua?
Everyone's gonna be in a league with at least one person, I think, that's gonna name their team the Hawk.
It's something else. But like this team's crazy good offensively. Offensive line's probably their only question mark. Robert Hunt left for Carolina. He was the highest paid guard in the NFL when he signed. $100 million for 5 seasons.
Yeah, for a guard.
That's Carolina. Like, it's just like, oh, you played for a good offense? We'll take you. Like, we'll pay
must be pretty good.
Yeah, that was classic.
Like osmosis.
And Robert Hunt, like the thing about him is like, there's always been concern. It's like, can he keep weight down? Like, he's always been really heavy.
He's going to be going to Bojangles and Spartanburg.
Yeah, and well, the guys like that, when they're so big, like, do they stay healthy throughout the whole season? Teron Armstead, really good player if he's healthy and he's going into year 12. Yeah. So can you really rely on him to be that consistent, like, terrific left tackle?
They did draft Patrick Paul in the 2nd round, so they might also be thinking that we need a contingency plan if Teron can't play or something.
Yeah, I think that's what their plan was. They kind of did that on both sides of the ball with their offensive and defensive lines.
That's true. Yeah.
Austin Jackson's going to be the starting right tackle. He hasn't really lived up to his 1st-round pedigree. He was actually in the same class as Tua. He's kind of the 1st-round pick everybody forgets about from the 2020 class for the Dolphins. But he's fine. He's just you just want better for a 1st-round pick, I guess. Aaron Brewer signed from Tennessee and can play kind of anywhere on the interior. Connor Williams is a free agent. He's recovering from knee injury, but maybe they sign him back. I think Schefter just posted a couple of days ago that he expects to be ready
for training camp. Yeah.
Yeah. Isaiah Wynn was decent at left guard. And then you mentioned Patrick Paul, 2nd-round pick, freak athlete. But, like, I think ideally they don't want to play him this year. They would love to have Armstead stay healthy, and you can just kind of develop this young rookie and then plug and play him along the offensive line whenever you need him. But I think this team offensively, I expect them to be one of the best in the league again. I think there's no other reason to say otherwise. Unless Tyreek Hill gets hurt, then things change. Any thoughts on the Dolphins offense?
Yeah, and they're unbelievably good. It's just can they keep the momentum rolling throughout the year and not dwindle away around Christmas time?
Yeah, that's just the weird thing. It's like it cut off. And they had some good wins even in December. It's just
when they beat Dallas on Christmas Eve, I was like, oh, they finally they're gonna win the East.
Yeah,
and then they didn't.
Yeah, the way they played Buffalo was really disappointing. But I also think
Brutally.
that was just like I also don't think Sean McDermott gets enough credit for that win.
Yes, that was a veteran, experienced Buffalo team that knew how to go in to, and also the fact that they were at home didn't even, that was also pretty sad for the Dolphins fans. There was as many Bills fans there, and that was the Dolphins' best chance to win the division in 15 years.
Yeah, I would be heartbroken if I were a Fins fan in that situation.
Oh yeah.
Going to the defense really fast. I would say I'll start with this. Anthony Weaver could be a fine coach.
Mm-hmm.
He may really be good for all we know. Baltimore has a history of producing great defensive coaches. I mean, Mike McDonald just got a head coaching job. However, I don't get why you run Vic Fangio off like they did.
And
I don't get
there
it.
seems like there was a good bit of animosity that came from that, and I just don't understand it.
Yeah, because I mean, Vic
happened?
Fangio's because Vic Fangio's been just successful everywhere he's been. And like as a Packers fan, I would love to have a coach at defensive coordinator that's just consistently good, that has his teams as top 10 units. Like I've dealt with years of Mike Pettin, Joe Barry, the shell of Dom Capers. Like I would just give me 1 year of Vic Fangio, but they had it and they're like, no, we don't want that. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
I have some questions about this team defensively. They lost Christian Wilkins to free agency, and understandably, they don't have a 1-for-1 replacement. He was one of the best interior defenders in all the NFL. You're just not going to find that. Like you would have to have a top 10 pick to make that work. They'll probably have to rely on a combination of Benito Jones, Tier Tart, I think that's how you say it, Neville Gallimore, and Jonathan Harris. And all those guys are fine, but I think Wilkins is really going to be a missing piece for this team. And I'm curious to see how they are against the run. And I even think they have a lot of question at the edge. Can Jalen Phillips, he tore his Achilles on Black Friday. Like, I don't think he's going to be ready to play. And even if he comes back, like, is he going to be an elite pass rusher coming off an Achilles injury? I don't know. Bradley Chubb, he hasn't really had a good career. If you look back at Chubb, he was finally kind of putting it all together and tore his ACL on New Year's Eve. So he ain't going to be ready to play either for week 1. Andrew Van Ginkel, he left. He went back and he's teamed up with old coach Brian Flores in Minnesota. So this whole team week 1 is going to have like a different set of pass rushers than what they had week 1 of last year. Chop Robinson, who I think both of us were pretty big fans of.
Yeah.
He has a ton of ability, but the NFL is a big transition for any pass rusher. I don't care who you are. Like, are you going to rely on him to be like what you could get from Bradley Chubb or Jalen Phillips? Shaq Barrett's been awesome in his career, but he's 5 years removed from his 19.5 sack season, and he's 31 now. So how much are we going to expect Shaq Barrett to carry the load for the edge rushers? Inside backer, Jordan Brooks, he's fine. First round pick for Seattle back in 2020. I think he was the pick, I believe, right after Jordan Love, if I'm not mistaken. But he hasn't posted a PFF grade in his entire career over 60. So probably a bust. And there's probably a reason Seattle didn't give him his 5th year. So he's on the Dolphins now. We'll see what happens there. The secondary is probably the strength of this team. Jalen Ramsey, big name, but he had the lowest graded season of his career last year. Kendall Fuller is underrated. I think he came from the Commanders. He's been pretty solid throughout his career.
He was actually a part of the Alex Smith trade. So he went to Kansas City and he went back to Washington. So I always thought that was kind of he's basically the reason why Mahomes grew up like he did in a way.
Yeah, that's true.
Indirectly.
He's been a solid corner, not like a superstar by any means. I think this secondary is going to rely on Jalen Ramsey getting back to the level of play that he's been at in his career. At safety, Javon Holland, really, really good player. I would argue probably their most consistent player on the roster defensively right now. And then Jordan Poyer, he's been really good. But, like, how much longer is Jordan Poyer going to be, like, a really good safety? Because he's, like, approaching, I think, like 33 years old. Yeah. So there's a lot of questions defensively. But like we said, the pressure to me is all on Tua and it's all on Mike McDaniel. You got to play better when it matters. December and January, this team needs to improve. They're the Dallas Cowboys of the AFC.
They really are. And even looking at their schedule, just to wrap up the Dolphins here, it might happen again this year. They have a really, like, up until Thanksgiving, their schedule is very, very manageable. Like, there's a scenario they go into Thanksgiving with 1 or 2 losses. I'd be shocked if it was more than 3. If it is more than 3, then they're really screwed. But
Thanksgiving on is just ridiculous.
Thanksgiving on is a really tough schedule. Like, their easiest game might be home to the Jets.
So it's at Green Bay, Thanksgiving night.
Yes, it's at Green Bay. I was just staring at it. At Green Bay on Thanksgiving night. They come home to play the Jets the following Sunday. So they get the mini bye. Then they're at Houston. They come home to play San Francisco. They go to Cleveland on December 29th. And then they come home, they go to play at the Jets. So you might be getting Aaron Rodgers fighting for a playoff berth that day.
So 3 young quarterbacks who have playoff experience: Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, and then Aaron Rodgers twice.
Yeah.
That's going to be tough. So, and it's going to, the NFL, it's like they did it on purpose, because they're going to be like 9-2 going into Thanksgiving night.
Yes.
And then, like, the talking point is when they're 9-4. Like, oh, look.
Here it comes again.
Oh, no. Is Mike McDaniel on the hot seat? Like, and that'll be the main thing I'm watching. But I agree with you. I'm fully confident. Like, I could see
Green Bay is going to put the hole there. That's going to be a fun game, though. I don't know if I'll be able to stay up for it like that late on. Well, I will be, but usually by that point of Thanksgiving, I'm not watching football anymore. I'm partaking in beverages. But that's going to be a great game, Green Bay and Miami that night.
Yeah. And I'm with you. Like, I could see if they get through Jacksonville and Buffalo to open up the season, like, I could legitimately see this team being one of the last undefeated teams in the NFL. Like,
absolutely.
I could see, because after Jacksonville and Buffalo, which they get at home in September, which is a huge advantage in Miami.
Yes.
They're at Seattle, Tennessee, New England. Like, those are winnable games. Indianapolis, Arizona. I think, like, they could be going into the Buffalo game. I think maybe 7-0.
Yeah.
Like, that's the crazy thing. I would be interested to see, like, if there's a bet to make, if the Dolphins, like, if you could bet on the last undefeated team remaining.
I think they're on DraftKings. They do have that.
Yeah. So the Dolphins might be that kind of team. Like, they just really backloaded the schedule with tough opponents, which, come on, NFL, like, we know what you're doing there. Like, you're trying to create a storyline.
You sneaky mom.
Moving on to the Jets. The Jets are not an interesting team. No one ever talks about them.
Yeah. Who?
Yeah. I'm going to start with an Aaron Rodgers quote from 2023 on the Pat McAfee show. Quote, anything in this building that we're doing
I
has
already know
nothing
this
to
quote, actually.
that has nothing to do with winning needs to be assessed. The bullshit that has nothing to do with winning has to get out of the building. He then, I think, like, has...
Was that the Jimmy Kimmel episode?
Yeah.
Where he called Jimmy Kimmel a pedophile or something like that?
I think, like, he might have done it the same episode or, like, right after it or right before it. I can't remember. Like, the Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, like, people were like, oh, there's friction. I was like, they're perfect for each other because Aaron Rodgers, like, lives off of dysfunction. And the Jets are dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jets have as much talent as anyone in the league. I would argue that I think it's one of the most poorly run front offices and coaching staffs in the league. And that's the reason over the last 3 years, they went 4-13 in 2021, 7-9 in 2022, and 7-9 in 2023. They kept failing at the quarterback position. They drafted Sam Darnold in 18. That busted. Zach Wilson was a disaster. You bring an old Aaron Rodgers, he gets hurt immediately. And they just can't figure things out. And they're perfect for each other. And to kind of start with the Jets, even though, like, I hate everything about them in terms of, like, how they operate, like, I still see a very high-end range of outcomes for them. Like, if everything goes right, I think their ceiling is as high as anyone's in the NFC not named like, or the AFC not named like Kansas City. So I don't think this team's winning the Super Bowl, but I could see them making the AFC Championship. I really do. I think they have a ton of talent. The main question,
the very Jets thing to do, like to kind of fly through the AFC playoffs, like they did it 98, 09, 2010.
Yeah. And then haven't been back since 2010.
Yeah.
I think this team is, and we'll get to it, this team is going to be defined by Aaron Rodgers. Like, how effective is he going to be? Nathaniel Hackett managed to do even worse than his performance in 2022 with the Broncos, which is just impressive, I think. Like, that you can go from that 2022 Broncos performance with Russell Wilson and have an even more incompetent passing game. Like, I get Zach Wilson's terrible, but at the end of the day, Zach Wilson wasn't really put in a great position to make easy plays. I don't think Nathaniel Hackett adjusted very well at all to Aaron Rodgers' injury last year. If Breece Hall doesn't break off a big play or didn't break off a big play, they went nowhere on the field. They were last in the NFL last season in 75-yard touchdown drives or more. So basically that means if they didn't get a short field, they were not scoring touchdowns and they couldn't sustain drives. To me, that just shows you how incompetent their offensive coordinator was. And what do? They kept him because Aaron Rodgers wants him as the so this team is completely 100% dependent on I wanted to say number 12, but he's not number 12 anymore, and that pisses me off. He's number 8. So because I for so many years I say it's all on number 12. It's like he's not even 12 anymore. But with that being said, I think the dysfunction can be completely overshadowed if Aaron Rodgers returns to form. This offense took a huge leap, or could take a huge leap, and the Jets could become real contenders. But you have to kind of understand that range of outcomes, because I think, like, if Aaron Rodgers returns to like where he was in 2021, this team's like a Super Bowl contender. Like, he's an MVP quarterback, and they have a team loaded with young weapons, and they have a good defense, right? I wouldn't argue against that, but like, how likely do you think Aaron Rodgers is just going to become MVP quarterback again at age 40, coming off an Achilles injury? Like, do you see that happening?
I really don't.
I just think that's too much wishful thinking.
Yeah.
To see that. He had 2 dropbacks last year. So really there's no data to look at when it comes to his Jets career. Yes, he started a game. He ran out onto midfield with his flag, which made a great meme. But so really his most recent sample that we can go on is his age 38 season with the Packers. That was his
last completed pass was to a Detroit Lion.
Did you know the last completed passes for Favre and Rodgers were both interceptions? In terms of their Packers careers.
Yeah, as Packers.
At Lambeau Field.
Well, I guess we'll know when Jordan Love hangs it up. Every time he throws an interception now, I'm going to be like, that's it. It's over. His career's. No, he has to go through about 14 years of kicking our rear end before he can have that one boneheaded play.
Yeah. And then see, I called it 13 years ago. And then he'll go and get traded to the Jets. Okay. So, but I wanted to say the 2022 season is the last time we saw a healthy Aaron Rodgers play football. Played a full season. It was his second lowest graded season of his career. Second to 2015 being his worst. He was 23rd in yards per attempt, 21st in EPA, 13th in clean pocket accuracy. Those to me are very kind of predictive stats, especially clean pocket accuracy, because it's there's no excuse to not having an accurate pass when you're not under pressure.
Yeah.
I think we really did see a decline. I even always argued 2020 Aaron Rodgers and 2021 Aaron Rodgers, yes, they both won the MVP that season. They were not the same. 2020 Aaron Rodgers was an all-time season. 2021 Aaron Rodgers, I would argue there was a decline in play, but he was still excellent. And then there was a
wildly very complimentary that year. He just did everything he was supposed to do correctly.
Yeah, and they won a lot of games. And that was a season Mahomes wasn't great. Josh Allen had a lot of picks. Lamar Jackson was hurt. There was a lot of circumstances that kind of had an effect on that. But overall, if you look at his trends over the last 3 healthy seasons, it's been going down, not up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's realistic to just say MVP Aaron Rodgers is back, coming off an Achilles injury, mind you. I think if you're going to sell me on the Jets, there are some things to sell. The last thing I'll say about the Packers, the end of his Packers career, they had a good offensive line that season. They were a top 10 unit.
Mm-hmm.
And basically every PFF grade I could find. The 2024 Jets, you could argue, have better skill players than the 22 Packers. I wouldn't even say you could argue that. I think it's 100% true. Breece Hall is an electric running back. You had Garrett Wilson. Mike Williams is probably a better number 2 than Allen Lazard, who's on this team, by the way. They have a better group of skill players. Their offensive line's really good on paper, but it almost feels like a paper tiger to me. They acquired a bunch of players, but I don't know how well it's going to mesh together.
Yeah.
Their O-line is really good, but can Smith stay healthy? Tyron Smith, who they signed from the Cowboys, he hasn't stayed healthy with the Cowboys, and that's why he's not in Dallas anymore.
Yep.
Can Olu Fashanu, 12th pick in the draft, really good player, but can he play right away? It's a lot to ask for him to just come in and be a bookend tackle day one. He could be. He's got the talent. He never gave up a sack at Penn State. I get that. But high range of outcomes. We're asking for so many 99th percentile outcomes to happen for this team to just be a Super Bowl contender. Is Aaron going to magically return to that 2020 to 21 form? I don't think so. And the thing is, he had those MVP seasons with LaFleur, Devontae, Aaron Jones. And the thing I would argue is he had a season, he had rapport with those guys, specifically Adams and Aaron Jones. He had Adams since 2014. He had Aaron Jones since 2017. He was in a second season with LaFleur when he started getting into his MVP form.
Yeah.
Even though Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson have all the talent in the world, Like, is it going to just be this cohesive like unit? And remember that like Rodgers is almost 20 years older than these guys. Like, does he even connect with them? Like, I have a lot of questions how it just all comes together for this team.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people do. I mean, he's skipping mini camp and he's a distraction, but you have to deal with him because he's your only option. Talking about Breece Hall, one of the best running backs in the NFL. Ironically, doesn't have a 1,000 yard rushing season. Were you going to say something?
Oh no, I just wasn't going to agree.
I said one of the best. I said one of the best, not the best.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Well, McCaffrey's the best one, but I would say like in terms of weapons, Hall is one of the best. If you look at first innovative tackles,
talent, yes, but his success percentage just has not been good enough.
That's the one. That's
he gets
the one.
A lot of empty yards.
Yeah,
breaks a long one here and there, and then a bunch of. So his yards per carry at the end of a game might look all right, but it's. He did average 4.5 yards per attempt last year, but it was an empty 4.5 yards per attempt. I thought
his success rate is the one thing that brings him down, but he was third in yards per route run, first in evaded tackles. Basically was the Jets' offense last year, and there's something to be said when you're playing on a team that can't throw the ball. Basically last year, the only way the Jets could move offensively is through Breece Hall. And I think he's going to be their best offensive player. If that he has to be, I think. I think a lot of people are relying on Rodgers. I think this team is going to be more run heavy than people think. I think he needs to be better about, like you said, his success rate and eliminating negative plays. Like I watched a lot of Jets games last year, unfortunately, because I was just curious what the second round pick was going to look like. And there were a lot of negative like runs, and that's something Saleh has even addressed about him. And you made a great point about the success rate. He needs to just be more consistent about getting, instead of taking a 2-yard loss, and Saquon Barkley was kind of like this too with the Giants through his career. Instead of like always trying to bounce it outside and break like a 35-yard run, sometimes it's okay to take the 5 or 6 yard carry. Yeah. And Saquon was like that too. But in terms of impact on an offense, I think Breece Hall has every tool available to him to be one of the best running backs in the league. I like right now, I think the only guy I would take in terms of talent level above him at that position is probably McCaffrey. McCaffrey's the best running back in the league right now. So I'm not disagreeing with you. Like Breece Hall isn't the best, but he's up there like in the top, I would say top 5 for sure. The guy I think is a little overrated in this offense is Garrett Wilson. 4th in the league in targets, but 54th in yards per route run. Yeesh. And I know Zach Wilson's, he's not like super great. Obviously, he's not good at all. But that's a concerning dip. There's a concerning dip in production from 22 when you had Zach Wilson, by the way, and then 2023, because in 2022, Garrett Wilson had 2 yards per route run, and it dipped to like, I think like 1.7. I should have wrote that down. PFF grades tend to kind of reflect those same numbers. He went from an 85 receiving grade down to a 73. He's a good player, a really good player. I think it's deserving that he went number 10 overall in the 22 draft. But I think he's just like, I think everybody's kind of projecting him to be like the superstar guy, and I just don't see it. I don't see him being like Devontae Adams for this offense. I think he's a safe guy to get like 1,000 yards, but the fantasy people that are expecting this like Devontae Adams, like a 1,500 yard season, I think they're going to be disappointed. Mm-hmm. I don't see that happening for Garrett Wilson. He just, to me, I don't think he's that kind of player. And you don't have do you have any disagreement with that?
No, I'm with you there actually.
So we disagree on Breece Hall, but we agree on Garrett Wilson. But I think the good thing for Garrett Wilson is he does have an X receiver opposite him now that can actually play. He doesn't have to play opposite Alan Lazard anymore. Mike Williams, he's going to play the X most likely. Kind of go back to the traditional. Games. What's that?
For 3 games.
Yeah, well, he tore his ACL last season. But he's kind of going back to the role, once he's healthy, to the role that he had to start his career, where I think he's going to be like a deep A-dot player, line up at the X almost every snap, and just they're going to say, go deep, Mike. And that's where he gets hurt all the time, because he tries to make these diving catches and then he breaks his collarbone. But he's been okay. He's not a league best receiver, but I think he's a solid number 2 option and certainly an upgrade over Alan Lazard. I think if you don't agree with that, then I'm going to question some things. But like you said, health is a concern for him. And then their tight ends, I don't really see anything interesting here. Tyler Conklin, everybody hypes Tyler Conklin up. I saw him play in Minnesota. He ain't nothing.
Yeah, no.
He's fine, whatever. But this offense, a lot of names, but I got questions. We talked about Tyron Smith, Hall of Famer probably, but he has a history of injury. And what's interesting is last year he was actually pretty healthy. And he was productive. He had his 3rd best passing grade of his pass protection grade of his career last year. And Dallas didn't retain him. I'm assuming Dallas didn't do that just because they know that they're staring down the barrel with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons, and having to pay all 3 of those guys at once.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll get to the Cowboys next week, but I don't know how they're going to do that. I talked about Olu Fashanu. This team's actually not that bad up front if things kind of come together. I think the left tackle is kind of the key. They gotta have Tyron Smith stay healthy, or Olu Fashanu just be an impact starter from day one. Because I think if they can get production there, you feel a little bit better about their chances. Because my other thing is Aaron Rodgers is not going to be able to move like he's been in the past. I mean, coming off an Achilles, he's not going to be as mobile.
Yeah.
He's going to be a statue, and he's never had to play like that. So they're going to really have to protect him well.
Shame.
Wow. No pettiness there. David Bakhtiari is not going to play here. That's just my bold take now. That's really my bold take for the Jets this season. David Bakhtiari is, I think, done with football. I think
David Bakhtiari is going to start a podcast with. That's my bold prediction.
Him and Bulaga are going to do one.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're going to try to do like a rip off of Bustin' with the Boys or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Or maybe he joins Bustin' with the Boys. I could see that as well.
My defensive note is this. I'll say this. This team is really good on defense. They got a lot of good players. I like Saleh as a defensive coach. They're going to be really solid again. Jeff
I was
Holbrook,
hoping he'd get fired this year so the Bears could make him their defensive coordinator.
Yeah. Jeff Holbrook is, like a lot of people think he might even get some head coaching interviews with how solid this team has been on defense. The one thing I'll say though, and I have to do this, is despite how good of a roster Joe Douglas has built, he still managed to screw this up. Bryce Huff was their best edge defender last year. And young player, and they just let him go to Philly. As like I wrote UDFA as a UFA, as an unrestricted free agent. And he could have just franchised him and kept him in-house. But instead, lets him go to Philly and then trades a 3rd-round pick to Philly for Hassan Reddick, who is like an older, unhappier version of Bryce Huff. That's like Joe Douglas masterclass right there.
Yeah.
Like and Hassan Reddick hasn't reported for minicamp or anything because he wants a new contract. Breaking news. So, and you traded for Reddick knowing he wanted a new contract and you didn't have it ready to go. That I don't get this, but despite that, they have talent. Quinnen Williams, superb player, 2 straight 90+ PFF grades in the last 2 seasons, 13 sacks in 2022. I would argue, I think now that Aaron Donald's out of the league, you could say who's better than him on the interior.
Yeah.
Like, he's right up there. Quinnen Williams is awesome. Jermaine Johnson took a huge step last year. And Will McDonald, you want to see him take another leap, but he had a decent rookie season as kind of a rotational player. If those two can play over Hassan Reddick, I think that's the ideal situation, which is another reason then why did you trade a 3rd-round pick to facilitate and have to pay a guy a big contract, knowing you have these 2 first-round edge rushers that are ready to kind of come in and contribute right away. I don't get what Joe Douglas does sometimes with how he team builds. The linebacker unit's probably their strength. CJ Mosley is kind of old reliable.
Yeah.
He's been good forever, and I think it's safe to say he'll probably be really good again this year. Quincy Williams had a breakout season last year. He was kind of a bust with Jacksonville. Day 2 pick back in 2019. Really awesome last season. The only question you have there is like, can he string together 2 straight seasons? Because that you see that a lot, right? Where guys have these breakout seasons out of nowhere, and then like they can't string together back to back. So I'll be kind of looking out to see how he's performing. And then I think the secondary is, I would say, outside of the linebacker room, the kind of the strength of this team, traditional, like kind of Robert Saleh defense. It's like it starts in the back and kind of works its way forward.
Mm-hmm.
Sauce Gardner is the best corner in the league. I think he's going to be probably a Hall of Fame talent. They nailed that pick, but as great of a pick as it was, it's like, well, you had the 4th pick in the draft. So
yeah,
you're almost hoping to get a Sauce Gardner-like player. DJ Reed, solid. Michael Carter's in the slot. Safety is a little bit bigger of a question. Chuck Clark coming off an ACL, and Tony Adams is a young safety, kind of trying to learn the NFL. But he's still an average player. He's just and he was a UDFA, so I think hell of a find for Douglas. So as much as I criticize Joe Douglas for like the Aaron Rodgers thing, the Zach Wilson thing, he still has put together a good group of players, but it's more than just putting together a roster. It's how does it all come together at the same time to where you can win games. And I'll say this, like, it's going to be interesting because Aaron Rodgers as a career starter is 148, 75-1. It's really, really freaking good. He basically wins twice as often as he loses. And the Jets are like the opposite. They lose twice as much as they win. So my take for the season are the Jets are going to go 8-9 because they're going to meet in the middle and they're going to be an average team in the league. That's my take.
I have the Jets finishing just at 10-7. Although that is tentative to change because as we go through the rest of these previews, if I see a game where I'm like, I gave that one to the Jets, I'm actually going to give it to the Colts or whatever. I'm just using them as an example. I think they do just have enough talent to get them there, but I'm not like a 10-7 season. The Jets will take that as like a Super Bowl for them. Like Rodgers will probably be annoyed by how
the reaction.
Yeah. Like because he's been on teams that have had 1st-round buys. He's been on a team that won a Super Bowl that's been in championship games. So if the Jets squeak out a 10-7 season and maybe a wild card spot, like that city's going to go nuts the media is going to go nuts, and Rodgers isn't really going to. I think he's going to be a little bit unhappy, as he probably always is.
And like I said, this team on paper like feels good. Like they got players, but I can't explain it. Something just feels off about them.
Yeah.
Like I don't get good vibes. And I almost feel like this team is going to be the 2018 Packers. That's what it's going to feel like. Because that was a season where Rodgers had a knee injury in week 1. But he played the rest of the season, but like he couldn't move.
Yeah.
It's just going to be a frustrating team. And I think the main thing is I want to see more adjustment on the coaching. Like I don't think Nathaniel Hackett's the guy. But of course they only did that to appease Rodgers. But I just, at the end of the day, I can't get past the fact that their high end range of outcomes is basically like, can Aaron Rodgers defy age and injury?
Yep.
At 40, and I don't see that. So I'm going 8-9 seems harsh. I'll go 9-8. And you're 10-7, so we're kind of right on the same page there.
Yeah.
Last, save the best for last because I think this is still the best team in the division, the Buffalo Bills. Coming off another as kind of a. Did I say? Did they go 11-6? I think they said 11, right?
Yeah, 11-6. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I wrote for some reason 12 wins on my guide, but they had another 11-win season. They've been 11+ wins since 2020, and haven't missed the playoffs.
Great streak.
Yeah,
for a
they haven't missed
has not had that history lately, or previously to this run.
They have not missed the playoffs since 2018. That was Josh Allen's rookie season. This year, a lot of people.
They made it the year before.
Yeah, they did with Tyrod Taylor. They had that crazy wild card game in Jacksonville where it was like 7-6 or 9-7 or something like that. Blake Bortles against Tyrod Taylor. Like Jim Nantz and Tony Romo did that game too, which is just wild. Like the biggest game of the year, and you're like, wait, Jacksonville and. Or not the biggest game of the year, but it's a playoff
the day before was Tennessee and Kansas City, but like back then, Kansas City was like, oh, why are we going to send Nance and I guess it would have been Romo. Why are we going to send them there?
Well, Jacksonville had like that defense that had a lot of personality with like Jalen Ramsey and Calais Campbell and like those kind of players. But this year, a lot of people are kind of assuming the Bills are going to take a step back, right? They lost a lot of talent. You can't deny that. I mean, we have it listed right here. Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Leonard Floyd, Mitch Morse, Dane Jackson, Tre'Davious White. Didn't even list Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde, right? Tons of talent that have produced year after year for them. But the thing is, like, it's kind of the opposite. Like, on paper, I actually kind of like the Jets roster better. But, like, I like the quarterback coach combination so much more in Buffalo. And to me, that means everything. And that's why, like, I still like Buffalo a lot more. And I look at their players and I'm not that impressed by them, but it's like, I don't care. I have Josh Allen. I have Sean McDermott coaching the defense, and Bobby Babbage is still there. I don't know. Like, am I crazy for thinking that?
No. I had a friend actually that was over in this basement about a month ago, and he's a Bears fan, but he's always had a soft spot for the Bills. So I guess they're like his second favorite team. And he was like, oh no, like, they lost way too much. They're not going to be good next year. And I was like, you just like, this is, I actually think it's a good thing that they lost what they did. Not like in the present future, it might be a little bit tough for them to overcome, but now they can build a team more around what Josh Allen does.
Yeah.
And what Josh Allen is. Yes, you have to pay Josh Allen a crap ton of money, but like you paid him now, like, so like you've already ripped the Band-Aid off. Like the worst of it is over. And now you can build out your defense with young, inexpensive players. You can find receivers that more fit with what he's trying to do. And I think that's why they got Keon Coleman. I think it's a good thing for them. I think they will take a step back this year, certainly, but I don't think they're going to be a team that falls like by 5 or 6 wins or anything like that. I think like a 2-win drop is about what I'm thinking for them.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I don't think this team is any worse than it was in it because, like, for example, Stephon Diggs wasn't even good last year.
No, they actually phased the offense got better when they phased him out of it.
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's like there's some things, and we'll get into Diggs in a second, but like I think this team is like probably a 10, 11, maybe 12 if they have things go right and they win a lot of close games. Like, I think they're there. I think they're definitely a tier behind Kansas City and probably Cincinnati. Like, I would put those two contenders. I think Houston might be better than them. But like, this team's going to be a playoff team. Like, I don't see any reason not to think that. And it's because of the core they have. And you mentioned Josh Allen. And like, yeah, he doesn't have the same supporting cast, but that's why you pay these guys. Josh Allen is good enough to continue producing without like the household names. Like, at some point you're paid to make Keon Coleman work, right? Or maybe Khalil Shakir steps up. But it's safe to say, like, and we had Aaron Schatz on a few weeks ago from FTN. He voted Josh Allen MVP, and I agree with him. And I would say he's been probably the second best quarterback in the NFL behind Mahomes since 2020.
Yeah.
Last year, 44 total touchdowns, including 15 on the ground. And that I'll get to Allen specifically, like, and how they're going to kind of build their offense. That was an NFL record. Like, the dude produces with his legs almost as much as with his arm. From like an EPA standpoint. Like, people don't think about that. Like, they're thinking so much about receivers. It's like what Josh Allen brings in the run game is almost as valuable as what he brings in the pass game, because like he's getting first downs and scoring touchdowns with his legs. 4 straight seasons of over 4,000 yards. So even though he's a great runner, he's also a great passer. His one Achilles heel that he's got to work on. And I think this is the crucial thing for this team to win a lot of games this year that he's got to cut down on, is turning the ball over. He's been
even with turning, and Aaron Schatz would actually tell you this.
Taking shots.
His interception total, though albeit high, most of his interceptions come like on third down, and they're like, there's a higher percentage of them that are like 20 to 30 yards down the field. So he's kind of throwing arm punts in a way. So like, he's throwing, like, his interceptions they're not like batted at the line, picked off by the linebacker. That's a bad interception. You get picked off by the free safety on 3rd and 14, and he's 24 yards down the field. Sucks. But that would be like giving up a 16-yard punt return. It's not good, but you would rather that over getting picked off around the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously he's not throwing 20 pick sixes a season, right? But I still think there's something to be said, and like, Aaron Schatz would probably disagree with me on this because this is not an analytical approach to football when I say this. But like, to me, like, there is something to be said for like a defense gaining confidence when they do pick you off. It's like knocking down a 3-pointer. Like, when you're cold from the field, and when you watch the ball go through the net, like, you start to feel like a confidence and a rhythm to your game. Mm-hmm. And like, if you're a defense and you intercept a pass as a free safety and you turn the ball over, like, there's a bit of confidence, and like, analytics people hate this word, but momentum, right? I think that goes with that. And I'm not saying Josh Allen was, like, I agree with you. Like, in terms, there's context to be said for his interceptions. But I think, like, the game I'm going to go back to is that Jets game, week 1. If he doesn't have the turnover fest that he had, they win that game. Like the
Yeah.
Jets could not move the ball. The way they basically won the game was got short fields because, like I mentioned about the Jets, they couldn't sustain drives. So they get short fields because Josh Allen, maybe instead of punting for a 50-yard flip, you're punting for a 30-yard flip or a 25-yard flip. Like that, the Jets can maybe kick a field goal and keep stay in a game is what I'm saying. If I'm Josh Allen, I bet they have an internal goal. It's like we probably want to limit the turnover worthy plays to maybe 15 or lower, or maybe 17 or lower, right? And some of those are tip passes too. I get it. I would like to see the total picks be below 15 this season, and I think that's going to happen. Because I think this team is going to run the ball a lot more than they have in the past. Because I think they're going to have to, just based off of kind of the personnel that they have.
Joe Brady started doing that a lot when he took over.
And they had to. They don't have the personnel to where they can go.
And it worked finally for them. They weren't able to run the ball for the first few years of Josh Allen. Like that, it was always like, well, like we're not a fantasy podcast, but
no,
it was not a good thing if you had a Bills running back, because I think I fell into the Devin Singletary trap twice. Thinking
Devin Singletary's
bound to do well in that offense, and he didn't. Nobody did. But then James Cook came along.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about James Cook on that depth chart is he had 281 touches last season. That was actually more than his entire career at Georgia. So that shows you how much they fed him last year. It's like he does not profile as a guy that is a bell cow running back. I don't think that usage is sustainable. I don't think they want him to be that bell cow. And I think that's specifically why they drafted Ray Davis. But you mentioned James Cook was great last year. Like he was really good.
Yeah.
At 1,100 yards on the ground, 1,500 plus yards from scrimmage. So he was doing it in the run game and the pass game. And Josh Allen really doesn't throw it to the running back all that much. Because why would you? But I think Ray Davis.
Did you wait? Latavius Murray is on the Bills.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why they drafted Ray Davis out of Kentucky.
Because Latavius Murray is 73 years old.
Yeah, I think he'll take that. I think what they're ideally going to do is have Davis be like the early down kind of plotter back and just take the cheap touches that aren't as important, and then have Cook play the important downs and the important drives. That's the way I would do it. And that way, like, I don't think they want to go at the end of the season, look up and see that James Cook had 281 touches. I don't think for any sub 200-pound running back, that's not what you want. And Davis was actually really productive at every stop he had. Temple, Vanderbilt, Kentucky. He transferred 3 times or twice and played at 3 different schools. He was good at all of them. And he kind of fits that like thick boy, like early down back, 5'8", 210. And Ty Johnson's also probably going to play into it, but this team's going to run the ball a lot more. And then not to mention Josh Allen, arguably the best rushing quarterback in the entire league. Because he can do it in like short yardage situations, like tush push type things. And he's still a dynamic runner. Like he's like Jalen Hurts mixed with like Lamar Jackson in a lot of ways. It's kind of crazy in terms of how he runs. But the main question we brought up earlier is that receiving core for the Bills. Do you think this is the biggest talent drain at any position across the league?
Position group.
Yeah.
Trying to think. Did anybody lose a lot of offensive linemen or anything like that?
Not that I can think of. Maybe
they also lost a lot from their secondary too.
I think the Cowboys as a team in general lost some talent because they're kind of anticipating having to pay their guys. So like a lot of the veterans are leaving, but like Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, accounted for 608 catches, 8,102 yards, and 64 touchdowns from 2020 through 2023. So you basically
hard to replace that.
I mean, Josh Allen is throwing for 4,000 yards a season. So that's what, 16,000 yards over 4 seasons?
Yeah.
This is half of their passing game, just completely gone. And over that 4-year span. And that's a lot of production for like a Dalton Kincaid, who was okay as a rookie. He still was less than 1.5 yards per route run. He was basically an average tight end last year, receiving wise. Do you want to? I don't think he's just going to take over like this target hog role. You have Dawson Knox there; he's fine. Keon Coleman, wide receiver from Florida State, like kind of a raw athletic guy. Like, is he going to be a like week 1 stud? I don't know.
Receivers usually tend to take some time to mold.
Khalil Shakir, like he's kind of a slot guy, like and it depends on kind of where he's gonna line up. Curtis Samuel has been with McDermott before. I don't know. Actually, I don't think he was with McDermott because I think McDermott was already in Buffalo before he got to Carolina. So, but Curtis Samuel is kind of a gadget.
He would have been with Joe Brady.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was in 2020.
Yeah.
And Chase Claypool, he's been pretty bad.
I have a feeling this is the year that he's going to break out.
What's so weird is Chase Claypool has broken out. Like he broke out as a rookie.
Well, he broke out his rookie year, and then he broke
had 10
down.
plus touchdowns. Like that's just crazy. I've never seen a guy be so good as a rookie just be complete dust. Like right after that, like maybe Kelvin Benjamin. Is that what we're looking at? Like, is that kind of play
into irrelevancy?
Like, because Kelvin Benjamin was actually really good as a rookie in Carolina, and then just like towards ACL, and then was fat afterwards, and then like never got good. And like Chase Claypool is not fat, but he was good as a rookie, and then like just I think looked at himself in the mirror too much, and then just loved himself a little bit too much. I don't know what happened with him. But my point is about this Buffalo receiving corps. Are you really relying on that group of guys to replace Stephon Diggs in his prime and then Gabe Davis, who like he could either go for 2 catches and 20 yards or like 8 catches for 200 yards. That was the Gabe Davis experience.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think what's going to happen, and Aaron Schatz would disagree with with this approach. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I think this is just what's going to happen. I think Buffalo's going to be a bottom 10 team in pass attempts. And they're going to rely on the run game with Cook and Ray Davis. And of course, Josh Allen, especially on like third downs. I think there are going to be a lot of design runs for Allen this year. He's going to have to kind of will them to victory. But you know, there's this intangible thing about the Bills. I don't think it matters. I think they know how to win games in the regular season. The only question this team has is like, can they beat Cincinnati or Kansas City in a playoff game?
Yeah.
But beating Kansas City in the playoffs, by the way, like it's kind of hard.
It is proven to be near impossible.
So I'm not like, but as for trying to win the AFC East, I would put Buffalo and Miami as like even odds. And Miami has a much better on paper roster, but Buffalo, like if it comes down to a December, well, these teams don't play in December. They play early in the year.
Mm-hmm.
But if it comes down to like they're tied in like week 16, like, and you told me I had to pick one team to win that division, I would take Buffalo over Miami.
Yeah, I still am, like I was explaining earlier, still a believer in the Bills and who they are because they're going to get back to where they were, and I think they might even be better in a year or two. I do think they come back a little bit. I'm taking Miami to win the East As I said earlier, these are all tentative to change, and I'll
Yeah.
probably go over them again on our final episode on around
August
August
15th.
15th.
Yeah. But let me finish up the position groups real fast for Buffalo because I will only go on.
All then.
What's that?
Nothing.
O-line sort of in transition. They moved on from center Mitch Morse. Connor McGovern's going to move probably to center, but he hasn't been very good as a guard. This offensive line is just kind of a makeshift offensive line. You have Osiris Torrance, who needs to improve. David Edwards was actually really good last year, but he only played 170 snaps. So that's not a lot of data to tell us whether he's actually good. The staples are the tackles. Deion Dawkins has been just like not one of the league's best tackles, but he's just been there. He's been solid and all reliable, basically. And he's been there since 2017. Spencer Brown took a big jump in year 3 last year, and he was a top 40 guy. So they're solid at tackles, but their interior is kind of in flux due to Mitch Morse and moving on from him. On defense, Ed Oliver is the guy everybody recognizes because he was like that top 10 pick from Houston in 2019. But he hasn't really lived up to that draft capital. It's been kind of a league average interior defensive lineman. Their best interior defender is actually Daquan Jones. He just needs to stay healthy. Tore his pec last year and missed a majority of the season. They need him to stay at that level and to stay healthy, because if they can get a lot of production there, I think they can kind of control games a lot easier because they're going to have to be able to stop the run. I don't think the Bills are not designed to outscore people anymore. They do not want to get in shootouts as much as possible because like I mentioned earlier, you don't have Steph Diggs, you don't have Gabe Davis, and as an explosive of a passing game to make a 34-30 outcome in your favor, At the edge, Greg Russo is a former first rounder from Miami. He's been playing like one. And he only had 5 sacks like last year, so statistically, no one's going to think he was that awesome. But he can rush the passer, and he's really good against the run. He'll be a guy they take the 5th-year option on, and I'd imagine they're going to try and get him extended. This is with the player on this team that I would argue he was the worst edge rusher in football, and I can't believe I'm saying this. Von Miller. He played 240 snaps last year. He had no sacks, and he had 3 tackles. He was one of the worst edge rushers in the league, like by PFF grade. He was like in the bottom 10, like maybe 100th out of 110th. I think they're going to try and get AJ Epinesa on the field and have him play over him. I think Von Miller's done. I think the only reason he's going to be on the team this year is his contract's huge, and they can't do anything about it. I still don't really understand their whole thinking behind giving him that contract at that age, but it is what it is. And but I think I think Russo and Epinesa, I think they're a solid duo at edge. You're not going to like this note, but at linebacker, Terrell Bernard, who's a 3rd-round pick in 22, is arguably better in 2023 than Tremaine Edmonds was in his 5 years in Buffalo.
Well,
Edmonds
I'm not
had
a Bills fan.
well, isn't Edmonds is on the Bears now?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't care how he played on the Bills.
Yeah, but Edmonds was pretty good last year for the Bears, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it seems like maybe Eberflus knows how to use him a little bit better. But the point is Bernard has come in and basically outplayed somebody that was a 1st-round pick for them originally. Matt Milano, consistent player, really excels in coverage. Not one of the league's best players, but he's just been there. He's been like a staple for them. He and Deion Dawkins have actually been there since the regime began in 2017. Jordan Poyer moved on. Micah Hyde probably going to retire. Taylor Rapp at safety was not very good. And Mike Edwards wasn't great with Kansas City, and he hasn't been average or really above average since 2020. That'll be a real question mark at safety. Like, are you really going to rely on Taylor Rapp or Mike Edwards to play, or is Cole Bishop, your second-round pick, going to be able to start day one? I think that's what they're hoping for. Can he come in and make an impact on their defense? Teron Johnson is one of the best nickel corners in all of football. Rasul Douglas, who was traded from the Packers for a fifth round pick swap. He'll be opposite Christian Benford. Both of those guys were top 15 corners last year. Rasul Douglas is kind of an interesting case of a player that, I mean, he was on like a practice squad with Arizona in 2021, and he's been one of the league's best corners the last 3 years. So it goes to show you sometimes you don't want to give up on players too quickly. I was talking junk about Tremaine Edmonds, where he wasn't very good with the Bills. The Bears signed him, and he's one of the better linebackers in the league now. So sometimes situations change, and it seems like Buffalo has figured out how to, not Douglas, because Douglas was good in Green Bay, but like Christian Benford, Douglas, they're both really good corners for them. And my last note on the Bills, and then I'll let you give your last notes. I think there's just something to be said about getting rid of a player like Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
And I said the same thing about Aaron Rodgers. It's like, yes, you are losing, and it's a clear downgrade in talent. I still believe Aaron Rodgers at age 39 had more physical, like passing talent than Jordan Love does.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said about locker room cohesion, just team chemistry, showing up for minicamp, just not being a pain in the ass and a distraction. And
or
Stephon
your
Diggs
brother being a distraction.
And Stephon Diggs, he was a malcontent, basically like outside of 2020. Like he was happy that season because he had just gotten paid. They had just traded for him. They had a great season. But like I felt like from 21 through like onward, there was always some little like he was the king of like the throwing shade on Twitter. Like what was it, like the cryptic tweets?
Yeah,
like
or his brother sending out a cryptic tweet or something like that.
Yeah. And I think there's just something to be said of like not having to deal with that crap anymore. And maybe the rest of the team, like maybe Khalil Shakir comes out and gets 800 yards receiving next year.
Yeah.
Or like Keon Coleman's better than we think and gets 1,000 yards as a rookie. Who knows? It could happen. Yeah. I just think there's something to be said for that. And with Diggs, going back to him specifically, it's not a coincidence. As soon as he he showed that he was not the same player he was 3 years ago. As soon as his play on the field started slowing down, they got rid of his ass so fast. It was hilarious. And good luck, Houston. But I going to Buffalo, I like this team, and I shouldn't. Yeah. On paper, I'm not impressed by this roster, but I don't know. I just get this gut feeling they're going to win the AFC East again. So I have Buffalo winning it.
Yeah, I have Miami as it stands, but that could change still too.
So what is any thoughts on Buffalo before we do our division standings?
No, you kind of summed it all up. And I had said a few things earlier too. They'll be back, I think, among the ranks or the high ranks in the NFL soon to come. I just think that it probably won't be this year with as much transition as they're going through.
Yeah. So division, give your order first to last.
So I have Miami in first place. I have the Jets in second. I have Buffalo third, but I have them at 9-8. And I have New England in last at 4-13.
I'm going to go I'll give a record, but I haven't given as much thought to records because I look at, like I said, kind of range. So I'm going to go Buffalo at 11 wins, so matching last year. I'm going to go Miami 11 wins. So I think they tie. I just think Buffalo beats them for the tiebreaker. The Jets, I'm going 8 wins at 8-9. And then New England feels to me like a 6-11 type team. So I think that's the way I see the AFC East. So you and I guess we basically just flip Miami and Buffalo. We have the same standings, right?
Not really. We're a little bit different. It would be more Buffalo and the Jets we flipped, but even the Jets I have finishing behind Miami.
So yeah, okay. So you have the Jets second. That's right.
Yeah, I have the Jets second at 10.
Sorry, we should have wrote these down on the screen so I could make reference. Yeah, so you're higher on the Jets than I am.
Yes,
but not by that much. I mean, like the thing is, like, I think all these teams could finish anywhere except the Patriots could finish anywhere between 9 to 11 wins.
Yeah.
Or even Buffalo, I think, could get to 12, or Miami could get to. I think Miami could even get to 13 if everything went right. But the way I kind of see it playing out, I like Buffalo just to kind of stay on top for another season. So next week we will be going through the NFC East. So we appreciate all one watcher or viewer for tuning in, but there will be people that will watch this later. Thanks, so we appreciate y'all watching and listening to this. If you have any questions for us, feel free to leave them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them. So I'm Steven. He's Neil. Thank you again for watching the Old Souls Football Podcast here on YouTube.